I remember saying, come on, Dom can't just lift up this car. And seeing people look at me like I was crazy, like, of course he can. It's technically possible if anyone could do it, it's Dom. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the belief that you all have in Dom is just profound. It was so enticing because it was so much wish fulfillment. God, you were asked to fly.
Dom, cars don't fly!
And it was that moment where we realized Fast and Furious didn't need to be restricted in any way. We were allowed these outrageous moments, and flying through the air and building to building was playing to that. It was one of those answers to the riddle, how do we one-up the spectacle of each film? Traditionally, we always tried to take a practical approach first. The first film, we went to race car driving school. As we continued making the film, it was more important for us to go to stunt driving school. So we'll take a practical run, but something as outrageous as that, if you want to know if Paul and I drove from one building to the next, as much as I'd like to say maybe, it'd be pretty obvious that might not have been the smartest thing for us to do. What's funny is if you talk to us back then, we'd be willing to do anything without taking away the magic of movie making. Thank God that was in 2014 and we were able to use CGI the way we did. And you can learn as much as you want when it's actually shoot day and the pyrotechnics are launching fireballs in the air and you're driving through smoke. It's always a dangerous thing. I don't think the world realizes how much risk one has to consider when doing some of those action sequences with cars. Fortunately, we were safe. There's been so many great stunts. I'd say this is in the top 5. My first reaction was giddy. I was like, holy shit, we pulled it off. I was kind of blown away. When you're sitting in that theater and you see that scene, the first thing that reacts is the inner child in you. And that's a testament to an iconic moment. After the first film, Paul Walker and I were at the airport and we're just sitting on the floor and people were walking over us and he looked over at me and he said, take all this in because this will be our last moment of anonymity. He knew that we struck a chord in the public somehow. It's a big part of my life, both the happy times and the severe melancholy that has come with this whole franchise. But I'm proud of every moment and every frame, everybody that's contributed to this record-breaking saga.
One of the best ways to watch the film is like alone on a crappy VHS or some old DVD player. Ed and I both knew that we wanted the film to feel like a documentary. We shot the film chronologically. We had waypoints, but were guided by GPS so they could navigate through the woods without being kind of hindered by a crew. We shadowed them as they were moving through the trees.
Dan and I kept away from them as much as possible.
And there would be a bicycle flag. So when they got into the general area of their waypoint, that's on their GPS, they could see the flag. So that's when they were instructed to pitch a tent. This is where you're camping for the night. And we had those plastic milk crates, and inside would be foodstuffs, fresh batteries for the camera, and film for the film camera. And then there would be these old school film canisters. And inside those little plastic containers would be directing notes. And they were all instructed to not read each other's notes. So we set up this conflict, but we allow them to choose the time when they want to have it. The mandate was just to roll on everything. The name of the scene in the script, The Confessionals, it was the moment of the film where it stopped being a project about the Blair Witch and started being a chronicling of their last days on Earth.
We were directing the actors like their conscience speaking to them. For Heather, it's like, you're responsible for this. Say your goodbyes. You turn the camera light on and point the camera at your face. Just give us everything you got.
She took the camera and walked off by herself and just had this monologue to end all monologues. There was a lot more snot. There was rivers and rivers of snot. We wanted to strike a balance between the performance and not getting too distracted with the snot flow.
But I remember first seeing that monologue and our jaws dropped. And I think that was the moment where we were like, wow, this really could work if we don't screw it up. We knew it was something special. And we kind of made this little bit of film history.
The people
people have spoken. And if they want to march, then I'm marching with them.
I remember there was this solemn energy where everybody understood what we were doing. We were retracing historical footsteps that have guided us through this history of our country. We all understood how sacred that bridge was and what our jobs were. You're not just making a film, you're recreating a moment in time.
Selma represented an attempt to redeem the soul of America, to help us move closer to the participation of all people in the political process.
It was really special when John Lewis came to set while we were filming.
I did spend time with the young man who played me and the young man who played Martin Luther King Jr. They really became the embodiment of the whole struggle in Selma.
To see him in the flesh for the first time was one of those moments where everything freezes, and he's the only person who is still in real time. You think about how brave this man is, this hero, and what he did to inspire a generation of activists who are changing the world today. I was so honored to step into his shoes, and I hope that I and the rest of the cast did this story justice.
I really loved the way they tried to walk in our shoes. They made the film so real, not only the way they spoke, but the clothing they wore. Wearing a backpack the same way that I did. The young man who played Dr. King was dressed like Martin Luther King Jr. and he spoke like Martin Luther King Jr.
Trying to gain access to the registration office, which is our legal right.
You don't see too many African-American women directors, but Ava's one of a kind. I remember being in awe of the way she was able to helm the set. It takes a special filmmaker to understand the responsibility in telling a story like this. We were creating this story from a place of love.
When I watched for the first time the scene of us walking across the bridge in an orderly, peaceful, non-violent fashion, it was so real. They were able to make the drama come alive on the streets of Alabama, to make the words, the suffering, the tears, the crying, but also this great sense of determination that we were going to continue until we got the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed.
Selma, to me, felt like a triumph. I can't remember anything that I've been proud of to be a part of, something I won't forget. It blows me away that we're able to teach people a history that often gets watered down about these men and women who are at the front lines of justice every day, sacrificing things that we couldn't imagine just so we can do what we're able to do today.
This film helped educate young people around America that did not know people could register to vote simply because of the color of their skin. On that day, we were attempting to walk the 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery to dramatize to the nation that people of color wanted to become participants in the democratic process. But I felt then, and I feel today, that in spite of everything, we shall overcome. We shall be free.
It's her, the sparkling diamond.
With Moulin Rouge, I'm going to use this word, which was totally not around 18 years ago when I made this movie, the mashup. That Elephant Love medley, all the different love songs all mashed together, publishing-wise, you couldn't have done it before Moulin Rouge. So I had to ring the actual artist. I mean, I didn't know Elton John. So I rang him up and he said, well, that sounds like a fantastic idea, darling. Of course we're going to do it. And then I reached out to David Bowie and then Bono and all these icons, and they all just thought it was a great, daring idea. The trapeze moment.
That was something Baz wrote into the script.
Given that the Moulin Rouge was part dance hall, part Disneyland for adults, you wanted this great entrance.
Baz, as a director, as a visualist, his first question is always, where are the entrances and exits?
You see Kabang, and then you see the flitter, and then you see the silhouette of her, and then you see her body, and then you see the hat. And then the very, very last thing you see is the eyes and the face under the hat. So it's a very slow curtain reveal, and it's like the sparkling diamond. I thought, wouldn't it be great if we put her in a circus trapeze and we did a trapeze number? But we'll have to have a stunt person. But Nicole, being Nicole, was like, no way. So she trained with a circus person, and when you see her swing around, that's her all the way through that footage. She's on the trapeze, she's being swung around, she comes down, she falls into all those guys. So she was 100% stunt-free on that moment.
Nicole's costume, when she first appears on the swing, is called the Black Diamond outfit. It was very interesting, all our discussions about how to make Nicole this classical heroine.
Satine is a courtesan. She's not a street girl. Courtesan is like a geisha. So she had to be very iconic. Now, the character of Satine, we kind of mashed many other iconic characters like that.
We wanted to maintain that 19th century feeling of being corseted, but at the same time, we wanted to call on a myriad of classical movie stars. We used Marilyn Monroe's costume in Bus Stop, the fish scale pattern, as a little nod to her.
The hat, the look, the reveal of the face, I mean, that's totally Dietrich.
All those elements melded together to create the ultimate showgirl costume. She was Satine.
I feel like, wow, it's already 20 years since I made that.
The affection that the audience holds for the title is extraordinary.
It's like some child that I conceived and has grown up, and now it's run away and fallen in love with an audience, and occasionally it drops by and says, "Hi, Dad," but it's got a life of its own.
I wrote you every day for a year.
You wrote me?
Yes. Wasn't over. Still isn't over.
The idea was this place had some magic to it. The ducks in the lake and the size and scope of the place reflected how much he loved them. But New Line said, no birds. I said, what? They said, no birds. It can't be done. I walked out of there with my line producer, and my line producer said, I like the birds. I said, me too. What we did, unbeknownst to New Line, we had a guy that was in the Parks and Services department, and he said, I have a wing. So what we did is we bought 80 or 90 hatchlings of these geese. We kept them in a semi-trailer. Every day he would march them out to the lake, feed them, and then march them back to the trailer. And after a few months of this, during pre-production, they became bigger birds. By the time we got there on the day, the studio came down, so they were mad that we were doing the birds. This better work. The Parks and Service guy marched them out there like the Pied Piper. They did their thing, and he marched them right back like the greatest trained animals you've ever seen in your life. The rain scene is a poster and the scene that a lot of people remember. It was a bright, beautiful, sunny day and didn't feel right. So we shut it down, and I said, try to find me a cloudy day. It'll be better if they get caught in a thunderstorm. There's rain towers that have big sprinklers at the top, and you localize the rain. You put the camera where you want it. You put your unfortunate stand-ins in the spot, and then you adjust the sprinklers until it looks like it's raining. Lateral thinking, and that's filmmaking in a nutshell. You get to stump think laterally and get what you want another way. Rachel and Ryan were a revelation. They had beneath the surface chemistry. Initially, they didn't get along. There was something built up between these two kids, and it has nothing to do with directing. The scene was like, he's mad at her, she's mad at him. He says he wrote her every day, and that's the key that unlocks the door. And when that door got unlocked, I didn't need to direct nothing. It was sparks of flying. They wound up together for many years after the movie. They weren't together before that kiss, but they were together after that kiss.
We had this idea that the film is shot by somebody finding a consumer camera in the debris that's left behind, and it's just him and our lens. And in fact, our lens was actually dozens of lenses. One of the advantages of using these smaller cameras is that you could shoot from multiple viewpoints. You don't get much time at these locations free of people leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you can grab the odd moment when there's nobody there. And then you can edit in a way that makes it look like it's in no rush. You can close Westminster Bridge down, but you have to pay a lot of money. So we didn't have any of that money, so we thought, okay, we'll do this early morning thing. And the only people around are ravers coming out of clubs, and they can be talked out of going across the shot. So we had this whole society going on. Early in the morning in London for 7 consecutive days, we would be the dawn vampires. sucking up what the city could give us for this story. In Britain, the police won't stop traffic unless you pay, but they'll let a civilian in a yellow vest do it, provided there are no objections. We could position traffic marshals at each end of the bridge to stop any cars that might be around and ask them to wait the 90 seconds that it takes Killian to walk across the bridge. So we hired a load of students because they're cheap. And my daughter brought some of her friends, and they're quite glamorous girls. And it worked in our favour because it's very sexist to say it, but it tends to be angry men driving around London at 4 o'clock in the morning because they've got to get up early for work. So they were stopped, and it wasn't me stopping them, to whom they would say, you, and drive straight through, like irate drivers do. It was these lovely students saying, hey, hello, we're making a movie here. Do you mind waiting for 2 minutes? No problem, darling. I'll wait here. What's your name? And it worked. So every day we hired more and more of these girls to block the traffic. And I kid you not, there's not a moment of CG in it where we took out vehicles or anything like that. And then we positioned 10 very small cameras on the bridge at different points. And as he walked over, he'd only be on the cameras for a few seconds, but we could put together those shots and make it look like the whole bridge was ours. We had endless time to shoot it. We were going to call the film Hello, but it sent the complete wrong signal. 28 Days Later is a much better title. Even though there'd been a Sandra Bullock movie out the year before called 28 Days, everybody will think it's a Sandra Bullock movie. You can't call it that. Everybody will think it's a sequel to 28 Days. But we stuck to our guns. There's a statue in Piccadilly Circus, and when we visited it, we realised there was scaffolding all around it. And you just thought, oh no, So we came up with this idea to make it look like people had gathered at Piccadilly Circus and wrote notes to each other saying, have you seen this person? And so we spent months making all these notices on these boards, and then we clip the boards onto the scaffolding. He walks up there and realises that all the people have gone, and before they've gone, they've tried to find each other, and they'd gone too. They've all gone. We shot the opening a couple of months before we shot the rest of the film. We knew it worked straight away because we edited this bit together and put this music on it, and you could tell, oh my God, that works. It's quite rare on a film when you know something works that well. It's just like, whoa, which was an inspiration for the rest of the film because we knew we had a beginning that rocked.
Oh, I think my dress was probably just tight.
Oh my God. You got food poisoning from that restaurant, didn't you?
We had a fantasy sequence when they go into the dress shop.
And it was really a very funny sequence of her having this fantasy of what her life would be like if she could be in this dress.
Kristen's character is all of a sudden in a castle, and all the men at the wedding are fawning over her. That's just to escape from the castle. She goes running out into the fields and runs into the forest, and she sees...
Matt Damon is a wood chopper with his shirt off, and he's like, quick, come run into my muscles.
They end up under a bearskin rug. On a bearskin rug, and he was like combing her hair. In the meantime, Helen gets the women to get the dress she wants because Kristen's caught up in her fantasy.
It was very funny, but we wanted kind of a big physical water cooler scene.
Judge came and said, look, go write something that ends with food poisoning. We had to bring the perspective into how a woman would deal with having food poisoning and trying to cover it up.
It was Annie Mumolo goes, or she would do this, and she acted that out. I remember her just going, it's happening, and slowly sinking down onto the carpet. And so we were like, okay, that's so funny. I'd never heard an audience of women laugh that loud at something in my life. As a comedy director, you live for those moments when something just goes through the roof. It just rocked the house down.
I feel lucky that people responded to that and to the movie in general.
The reason that movie worked, it was the fact that this was a very relatable story about a person having a crisis in their life. Every comedy is a drama that just has a lot of funny stuff.
Oh, we're gonna need more wax!
I'm staying. Steve Carell said he had worked on a sketch at Second City where he played a 40-year-old virgin at a poker game, and everyone was talking about sex and telling dirty stories, and it became very clear that he was making his up. And sadly, instantly, I understood what he was talking about, and we started writing the movie together. I've always been a big fan of improvisation, and with the 40-year-old virgin, Steve is such a master at it, and that's how we did the chest waxing sequence. Well, we wanted to do some version of a makeover sequence, so we knew that had been done a ton of times. So we were trying to think of original scenes for a makeover montage. And then Steve said, what if you waxed me, but you did it for real? Now, at the time, I thought, wow, what a crazy idea. Whoever gets waxed? Since then, I realized that he had been waxed many times in his life and was pretending that he had never been waxed before. So we hired a woman who came in and said, I act and I wax. So we shot it like a documentary. And I set up 4 cameras, and we had some basic beats we wanted to hit. We wrote out tons of curses, and we also made lists of words that weren't real curses that sounded like curses. That's how we got to Steve screaming, "No, Kelly Clarkson!" Part of the fun of that sequence was we just put a camera on the 3 guys watching, and their real reactions to the horror of this are what makes it so funny. One of the things that happened while we were shooting was Paul Rudd noticed that the configuration that was appearing as she kept ripping off hair started to look like a face. And so then we encouraged her to move in that direction. And then Paul Rudd said, "You look like a man-o'-lantern." The idea was we just wanted to get the way you would actually react. So if you watched your friend get waxed, you probably would just start cracking up. So it didn't seem wrong for them to laugh during. The other thing that happened while we were shooting was Romany Malco was sincerely freaked out and couldn't watch any longer. So we had him run out in the middle of the scene because in real life he wanted to run out. And the woman who waxed Steve may not have been that good at it. You're supposed to put Vaseline over the nipples so you don't accidentally rip them off, and apparently that was a step she forgot about. But we didn't know because we'd never seen anyone get waxed before, so it would never occur to me to supervise if she was doing it properly. It was clear that she almost waxed his nipple off. She definitely was very close to removing his actual nipples. It was a big moment for me and him. We both weren't sure we knew what we were doing. We had an instinct. We liked the script. We hoped we weren't crazy. It was just one of those movies that no one saw coming, that had great word of mouth and made a lot of people happy. It was fun that we all had the courage to try something crazy, and it happened to work out.
Remember me?
Ideas are banging around in your head all the time, and you keep pushing them away until some get more insistent, and that's exactly what happened with Mad Max. This idea popped into my head. It was 5 women being chased across the wasteland, pursued by a warlord, and Max gets caught up in their story. And I said to myself, no way, I don't want to do another Mad Max movie. But like all good stories, they really do insist on being made in some way. It's Darwinian in the indigenous Australian culture. One of the creation stories is the story of 7 sisters escaping some malignant male, and they help create the topography and all the nature around. And there's only an afterthought that I figured out, we're telling that story. The only reason it's 5 brides that are being chased by the warlord is that we couldn't fit 7 into a car. Their champion had to be a warrior, and if it was a male, it just wouldn't work. It would be one man stealing 5 wives from another man. It had to be a female warrior, and hence Furiosa. The very first person who came to mind was Charlize. She was Furiosa. She'd walk out of the makeup van and roll around in the dust just to get it under her skin and under her nails. And before we started the film, she said, look, I've got to tell you something. I hate dust on my hands. She has some sort of aversion to it. And I said, oh, should we have wipes and things? She said, no, it's going to help me. She was the one who said, look, I'd really like her to have no hair. If she was serious, she wouldn't mess around with hair in the wasteland with all the dust and so on. And the other thing she was determined to do was not do any action as if it were a female doing a man's job. You see the way she does things, that headbutt at the end of the movie. They're difficult to pull off, and she was scarily good in that. One of the great concerns about the film is whether people could read enough to get the story. We were never explicit about everything. We knew something happened. And so in this race to get to the Citadel, she is the one who finds herself in a position who's the closest to Immortan. She's very badly wounded, and she uses this moment to hook this harpoon on his mask and say,
"Remember me?"
It implies a lot of grievance about their backstory. We can speculate as to what it might be, but we don't know all the details. I remember Charlize on that day said, "Look, I feel like I really want to say the line." "Okay, by you." I said, "Great." It just hit a sweet spot. And it was a little pause before the brutality of the moment and the continuation of the action that was to come. When an actor really is in that zone, you're a fool not to listen. The way I like to measure the worth of the film is for how long does it follow you out of the cinema. If you've forgotten it by the time you're in the car park, then perhaps it's not such a good movie. The greatest films are the ones that stay with you for a lifetime. I didn't expect Fury Road to be so well received. It was a tough film to make, but I've had people come to me and say, "I've just had a newborn baby girl and I'm going to name her Furiosa." Well, they come up and show me their tattoos of the characters in the film on them. I thought, oh my God, they're going to be carrying that around for the rest of their lives. Literally. That's the best compliment I could get. It's a humbling thing because it says that you have a big responsibility as a storyteller. You can't be casual about your stories. There are narratives that become part of people's lives.
I hadn't read any of the books, but I was recording some music for one of the television shows I directed, and in between each recording session, the orchestra were all reading Potter. So it was very clear that everyone was incredibly into these stories that Joe had been creating. When I went to read the books, there was something wonderful and authentic about Joe's exploration of what it was growing up in a school. The environments were magical and extraordinary, but the emotional truths were rooted in the real world, and it immediately appealed. Hallows was quite an extensive book, and I felt you could create two interesting films with Hallows Part 1, an independent, much more intimate movie when Harry, Ron and Hermione are out in the real world for the very first time, having to learn some really hard life lessons. And the second part was more of a blockbuster, entertaining conclusion to the whole series, which felt much more appropriate that we went out with a bang. This is the final confrontation between Voldemort and Harry Potter. The sequence is about a boy facing down this nemesis, this demon that had haunted him throughout his childhood. This is the figure that had killed his parents. I was keen to explore this unique relationship between Voldemort and Harry. Harry carries the spirit of Voldemort and they have this unity. And I had this idea that as they confronted each other at the top of a school tower,
let's finish this the way we started.
And Harry would grab Voldemort and actually pull him off this tower, and they would apparate around the school together, and we'd explore this weird visual synthesis that exists between the two of them. And they'd eventually tumble down into the courtyard. In the book, that confrontation takes place in the Great Hall, but I always wanted to give it a feel of a Western, away from an audience, and so we moved it to this vast courtyard, taking it into this down and dirty place where it was literally a scramble in the mud to finally decide who was going to win this battle that had been going on for such a long time. And I remember when we were filming it, it was absolutely freezing, and Dan's teeth were practically chattering, as was Rafe's, because it was a brutal winter that year. But that added authenticity. When you're bringing a series of major stories to its epic conclusion, one never really thinks about the pressure of having to deliver something that people are going to be satisfied with. You just get your head down and you explore it in the best way that you feel is right. It was the end of a very long journey with those characters and with those worlds. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge, knowing that expectations were sky high and that people wanted to have a properly satisfying emotional resolution to this series of stories. And I think we did it.
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him.
I grew up watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. There's something timeless about it with Elf. My whole pitch was let it look like it's a Rankin Bass Christmas special, how we could translate that to live action.
It just felt like something you'd never seen before, and I just committed to the character and hoped for the best.
I didn't want to do too much CGI in it. I wanted the whole beginning of the film to use forced perspective and stop motion. And it's a very dramatic juxtapositioning of this huge athletic guy wearing this costume built for a little wooden round puppet. And when you put him in the small sets and around the other actors that were shrunk down using forced perspective like Bob Newhart, just the sight gag of it all was wonderful. And then to launch him into the new world, then the costume took on another dimension, which was a guy dressed up like an elf walking around New York. And I grew up in New York, and you could literally walk down the street dressed like that, and people won't even look at you twice.
So here I was running around the streets of New York in yellow tights, thinking to myself, boy, I do hope this works.
Instead of hiring a lot of extras, we shot a lot of that stuff independent film style with a van and a camera.
There was a mix of please get away from me, and some people just kind of like, hello, how are you? So I could kind of weave in and out and get some honest reactions from people.
There are a couple people we planted in there. The guy dressed up as Santa Claus in a red sweatsuit, but other people passing him by, that was all real.
All that stuff of eating the gum off the street and hopping on the crosswalk, that was really kind of fun.
But sometimes he drew a lot of attention. I remember there's one sequence where we're moving through the Lincoln Tunnel. He's crawling along the side, and they just let traffic through.
But it added to the danger and the fear.
There were a lot of tire chirps and fender benders. People were distracted by that. The innocence was something that I really wanted to lean into, and I think a lot of it comes from Will Ferrell's performance.
It was something that played to my strong suits as an actor and comedian.
And he just loves to commit. He really knows where the laugh is in a scene. I remember the scene in Gimbals where Faison Love makes the announcement that Santa's coming, and he just screams. And then the reaction of the manager thinking his employee is screaming in his face is probably one of my favorite moments of the movie.
That was just my articulation of Buddy literally taking that piece of news, a man without a country in this strange land, finally getting to see someone he knows really well, and it would just be the most jubilant reaction. When Buddy is in the back of the sleigh and everyone's singing in Central Park and there's enough Christmas spirit to get it lifted off, I'm like, oh, I can't let everyone see me cry here at my own movie. So I was like, oh gosh, this is working on a level that I didn't anticipate, and I knew this had the potential to be one of those special movies.
I'm really proud of it, and I could tell through social media that it's something that people have made a tradition of. I'll see pictures online of people saying, hey, I'm introducing my son or my daughter to this movie for the first time, and they'll post a picture of Elf on television, and there's a little 3-year-old sitting there looking up at the screen, and that really makes me happy, and it's the best part of the job.
That right there, you're in the middle of the world.
Very quickly, it became clear the movie would really grab you by the scruff of your neck and take you inside this world and not let you look away from the screen. That had to do with strong color palettes. That epicness combined with intimacy is what Moonlight came to look like. One of the concepts in the film is this idea of trust in our parental figures, and I think there's a lot of conflict of Chiron's journey finding adult figures that can help guide him through some difficult moments in his youth. And Juan is one of these characters that really champions and gives a sense of trust. He does that in this swimming scene that had to have a sense of intimacy and a struggle with it. Our approach was to make the scene feel intimate, and that's when we said, let's get the camera out into the water. The camera needs to feel like it's participating within these scenes, not just documenting them. I'm not an underwater cinematographer. We didn't initially want that, though. Barry and I are often trying to visually represent characters' perspectives. We wanted it to feel like a struggle. And in a conceptual way, this was the idea of throwing me out there with this big thing and trying to fight the currents myself in the same way that Little is fighting the currents. I don't think Alex knew how to swim, and so we let Mahershala guide this young man, and me, camera included, out into the water, try to capture the swimming lesson in real life, in real time, like a documentary would. Sometimes your reaction to moments is as good as a well-detailed plan might be. Sometimes it's even better.
We got a swimmer. You want to try? You ready to swim?
We had scheduled half a day to shoot this swimming portion of the scene. So we're setting up the equipment, we're getting the camera into the water. Meanwhile, Barry, being from Miami, realized, oh, look, there's a storm coming. He said that we have about an hour and a half to get this shot. I think he's probably about right. I think it was about an hour and a half later. We had to run for cover because a massive rainstorm had come, and it was hours before we got back out there. The sky does change on us. At some point, we begin the scene in full, beautiful, clouded skies, and by the end of it, the dark rain clouds have come over us and alludes to what is coming, the journey of Chiron, this impending cloud.
At some point, you got to decide for yourself who you're going to be.
The swimming scene definitely stuck out to me, almost like a marker within the entire narrative that kind of stuck with you. We all have those in our lives, these markers that shapes our journey on some level, whether that's a swimming lesson or a bike riding lesson that alter your own personal narrative. I feel very lucky to have met Barry when I did. I felt very lucky to be at the beach that day with them and feel like I participated in capturing a story that has a lot of meaning for people. By no means did we think it was going to reach the kind of people it did. The film is so personal to Barry, I think is what makes it so universal. And I think Barry has a really wonderful way about finding ways to make stories intimate, which I think is what's connecting the audiences to these stories in ways that feel very powerful and very potent.
You have a knack for getting in trouble.
You have a knack for saving my life.
For me, it was a great love story with a real human being at the center, somebody that I could really identify with, somebody who had to do homework, someone who the girls weren't crazy about, somebody who was bullied, and yet he had to rise up and become this hero to protect the city. And it seemed like they had never heard that version before. I had very graphic images of how Spider-Man lands, what his pose looks like, how he swings from a web. The job was to bring that vision to the big screen. How would we do that? How would we get actors to move in a way that only a comic book artist could depict? That was really the challenge.
The mandate was just to make it as real as we could. When Toby's hanging upside down in the pouring rain and she's all wet.
This was the moment when Peter could both achieve his dream of helping the woman he loved, but it's also finally getting to kiss the woman he loves. The vulnerability that he exposes to her. I think that's why her pulling down the mask makes the moment special, because his character longs to be loved by her. And to remove the mask is exposing yourself to becoming vulnerable to someone who loves you.
There was a considerable amount of setup time. We're actually outside on the back lot with big rain machines. But to be able to see rain in movies, it actually has to be a lot bigger drops than real life rain. So when you're getting rained on in the movies, it's a lot of water.
You do take after take, and they're being doused in cold water, and it can become really chilling.
But we would have to get out there, get in position, get the rain going, and then we would have to lift Toby up on the wire, upside down in the position you saw him in the movie. And that would take a couple minutes, so it's a few minutes of misery each time we do the take.
And while he was doing the scene, I remember the water was falling down into his upside-down nostrils. So he was kind of drowning, but it was a kissing scene. So he had to pretend like it was a pleasant, sweet moment for him, when in fact he was semi-drowning. And then the only way he could breathe was through his mouth, and then I had him kiss Kirsten. They seemed to do very well with it. It was more about the trickery of the mask itself. We couldn't really get that look on the mask and have it be pliable. So it really wouldn't pull up and down. And we had to pretend as though it were, with Kirsten's doing a little bit of sleight of hand to help sell the idea that she actually pulled the mask down. There was a lot of technical aspects, but fortunately, Kirsten and Toby are so convincing that they made that all invisible. I felt the pressure that the genre was in trouble. Hollywood was soured on the superhero film around 1999.
I honestly, in my heart, think that this movie and how Sam did it absolutely set the tone of how a comic book movie should be made.
I loved Stan Lee's work, and I was trying to be true to it. And if people recognized from those Spider-Man movies that his stories were really effective, then I'm proud.
What is the birth of a superhero? The Superman pulling his shirt open the first time and revealing the S. So I knew that Wonder Woman needed an incredible moment. Diana wants to be a hero from day one, but what it is to be a hero does not become clear to her until No Man's Land.
I think the biggest reason I was obsessed with it was really from a character place, from Diana's point of view, and her saying, that's what I'm going to do, and stepping up over the edge. That was such a powerful way for her to step into being our Wonder Woman. I kept focusing in on the fact that this isn't about who she's fighting, and it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the trench. This is about war. This is her stepping across no man's land and saying no to mankind's method of war. And so for her to track the bullet coming towards her and then smash it away, like, no, that won't be happening. No, we're not going to do that. And I'm stronger than those bullets. And then she takes on even larger mortar fire as she continues down the no man's land. I thought that's who she's fighting. She's fighting gun violence. So that was the opponent. There were definitely arguments about, are we really going to put Diana in a Wonder Woman costume out in the freezing cold in the winter? But we had to do it. You have to build no man's land. It had to be real, or might not have looked right. It's funny because we talk about actors and, oh, they really have an easy job. Just, no, they don't. Gal Gadot could not be more applauded when she's halfway naked, doing this beautiful dramatic moment out there when the rest of us are in massive down parkas. So it was brutal. I felt a huge amount of pressure, but it was just a wonderful embrace for the world to support it and come to it the way that they did. It was pretty incredible. There's this one fan interaction that really sticks out in my mind. I was at a screening, and a man was there in a wheelchair, and he told me that so many times in the hospital he'd had to have help, and he would have no clothing on, and he would have to stand up and be held out of his wheelchair in these metal crutches. And it took all the bravery that he had in the world. And when he saw Diana step over the edge in no man's land in just her Wonder Woman outfit, willing to brave the world just like that, it was him. It felt like him. The fact that her decision to stand up and move forward, because she's an unlikely hero as a vulnerable person, and it made him cry, and he got emotional as he was telling me, that was one of the most touching fan interactions I had. I'm serious just thinking about it. It was such a powerful moment.
You're a liar and a thief. No. Murderer.
They were making these films of Lord of the Rings, and they wanted a voice for a digital character. Of course, they were talking about Gollum. In order to find the voice, I started to work on this notion of he's called Gollum because of the way he sounds, and what would make his voice sound like that. So I started to think about constriction in the throat, and as I was doing that, I was actually fortunate enough to witness my cat throwing up a fur ball, and it suddenly gave me this idea that the whole physicality of the role would be determined by this force within, which is built out of guilt and torment, caused this sound coming out of his mouth. They knew that they wanted to manifest Gollum as a CG character on screen. They weren't looking at this new technology called motion capture, and they had a clear idea that they wanted an actor to play him on set, so they didn't have to imagine anything. I remember the moment where Gollum is leading Sam and Frodo up Mount Doom. I was in this green suit, and I started to crawl around and get into character, and Pete was giggling away and crawling around with his camera and filming it from various different angles. And that was when he started to decide, let's just film Andy. The first pass was always acting with the other actors. The second pass was just them acting, but I would be slightly off camera. I would then have to do my performance again on my own in a motion capture stage. The third pass would be painting me out and replacing Gollum on top of me.
Wicked, crazy, false. No, nasty. Yes, precious, false. They will cheat you, hurt you, lie.
The evolution of Gollum being this almost schizophrenic personality, and we pushed the notion of Gollum being the more visceral, brutal survivor character, and Smeagol being the young, innocent, abused sibling. I had to find for myself something real so that the power of the ring would resonate. And so for me, it was really about addiction. Gollum is basically a ring junkie. His physicality was based on someone suffering physical symptoms of a very strong addiction. It's tearing the body apart and tearing the mind apart, externalizing what was going on inside his mind and soul. It really was an extraordinary thing to do, and I loved it. In fact, when I first saw the fully re-sculpted version of Gollum, it totally looked like my dad, which was kind of freaky, and now I know what I'm going to look like when I'm 22 years older. Also, I did have this extraordinary experience when this scene came up. I could literally feel the audience leaning in. Was this an actor? Was this a creature? It was like real hairs on the back of the neck stuff, actually. There isn't a single day that goes past when someone doesn't come up to me and talk to me about Gollum. I think that there is self-recognition in there. You know, we're not all heroes. We are flawed. He's meant everything, and I don't expect the character will ever leave me, to be honest, and especially as I grow older and probably get to look more like him.
So I was hired to be Keanu Reeves' double on this thing called The Matrix. It's a sci-fi action movie with kung fu and pretty surreal visuals. I got called saying, hey, you want to go double Keanu Reeves in this sci-fi movie? I'm like, no. My boss said, why don't you go to the audition? You'll be done here soon. I'm like, okay. So I get hit by a car and cut my head open, put a couple Band-Aids on it. I show up, I'm still bleeding from my head. I meet the Wachowskis, and in the background, I see Keanu Reeves in this big warehouse. Before the first Matrix, he had neck surgery. So he's in a neck brace, got a big beard, dripping in sweat, doing kung fu choreography, and it's surreal. I meet Keanu, and he's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, is your neck okay? Oh, yeah, no problem, just had neck surgery. And he just jumps right back into kung fu. I get done with the auditions, dripping in sweat. I just remember Keanu looking up, just gives me the little nod, like, pretty good. And I was like, that's the high point of my career. I had Keanu Reeves give me a nod. And it's funny that, I see Keanu every day now because we did John Wick. So I came on right after they started principal photography. And it was literally walking in off the plane and going right into the government lobby choreography. At the time, there were no digital squibs, so everything was practical. First time when Keanu runs down the hallway and the guns are going off and everybody's shooting at him, that was a week of prep just for the special effects guys to lay in all the squibs. So every time you do a take, you get one go at it. And if you miss, they spend another day resetting to blow it up again. Wachowski said there's about 4,000 squibs in the walls. So when we yell action, you're probably not going to be able to see anything. So Keanu and I both had to pretty much try to do the choreography with their eyes closed. And I remember looking at him going, okay, this could be a little tricky. He's like, yeah, okay. And, he nailed it first take. The Matrix is kind of a game changer for both stunt work and cinema, and to this day, I think it's one of the best directed films I've ever seen. What they were doing was the ramping effects, the slow motion, and how they would go with bullet time, and how they would intercut between normal speed and then slow motion and back. It had a vibe, it had a slickness to it that we hadn't really seen in any kind of action film. A lot of guys can try and copy The Matrix, but it's not the same as putting all those little pieces together. And the Wachowskis wanted to immerse us into a world that was both real and extreme, and when you sit and watch that Matrix, you are wrapped up in that movie. We were talking about The Matrix the other day, and we watched it again. I mean, how cool is it that, I get to watch The Matrix with Keanu Reeves? And we still laugh, and we still cheer, and to see the actual Neo sitting in a chair, we're both having a scotch watching The Matrix, and to see Keanu Reeves jump up and go, yeah, that's awesome! I'm not gonna lie to you, it's pretty cool.
That shot, the shot of all the Avengers assembling for the first time, was so much spectacle, so many visual effects. It was filmed in an open-air warehouse in Mexico, not in New York. There was nothing but green screen behind them. Hulk wasn't in the shot. Iron Man wasn't in the shot because they were CG and put in later. But it looked pretty cool, and Joss had a great vision for it. Cut to many months later, the visual effects are coming together. It's starting to look cool. Iron Man's there now landing. Hulk is there. But the moment when I realized that this could be an iconic moment, not just for the MCU, but for these kind of films, was on the mix stage. You get the experience of watching that final playback on the mix stage with Silvestri's amazing score, building to that moment, and I got chills. And I realized Joss had pulled it off. We had high expectations for what the movie could be. And the way the audience responded and the box office numbers behind it exceeded even our wildest expectations. It was astounding to watch and astounding to see them put it together. And the response to it and the continued response was one of those sort of pinch yourself, I can't believe this is actually happening moment. Every day at Marvel Studios, there's something amazing and special that happens. It was particularly special.
Do you think you got what it takes? Well, do you? Yeah. All right, you're in. Welcome aboard.
The idea for the film came from when I directed Monsters, Inc. At the end of the day, would crawl under my desk and just huddle up into a ball. And I had a lot of daydreams of just floating away. And so this idea of a house floating into the sky with balloons, coupled with the appeal and fun that I thought we could have with a grouchy old man, that's where the film started. And then we asked ourselves, why is he floating away? Where is he going? Why couldn't he just take the train? And that's what led us to a story of a promise to his wife that was unfulfilled and the reason for his journey. That sequence started fully scripted. We wrote multiple short little scenes. The first draft, we introduced the characters in a battle. Carl was trying to catch a bird, and Ellie came to the bird's defense and punched him. So now Carl was out for revenge. So it became a back and forth punching contest in the most unlikely places. We thought it was hilarious, but we showed it to the audience, and it just kind of went over like a lead balloon. Our head of story on the film came to me and said, I think this would work better with no dialogue. And I said, no, I think you're wrong. But he eventually talked me into it. My crockpot theory is I grew up watching Super 8 films that my parents had taken. There's something about stripping away some elements that makes it more emotional. Having something lacking makes the audience an active participant. And maybe this is why older filmmakers bemoaned the loss of the silent films. There's one moment in that montage where Ellie has to go to the doctor and it's implied that they can't have children, and that raised some eyebrows as we were developing the film. So we did experiment with taking it out. But the strange thing was, not only did we not feel the emotion as strongly in that one little scene, but the whole film lost a little bit. And I can't really fully explain that other than to say it was a real dark, low moment for them that made that relationship feel more real. The pain and loss of that situation bonded those characters together and made you empathize more for them. When we go out into the world and screen it, I sit over to the side and I sneak peeks at the audience. And we're only 7-10 minutes into the film and people are wiping away tears and really involved. And I thought, okay, I feel like we're onto something here. When we start out making these films, we're just trying to make something funny and entertaining and hopefully with a bit of heart and emotion to it. But they sometimes tap into people's own lives in ways that are completely unexpected. This is a bunch of pixels on the screen and none of it actually exists. So that's part of what I really love about making animated films is we can really make the audience care about these characters as though they're real people. These films in a way are dress rehearsals for life for a lot of people. When kids play house or cars, they're kind of acting out and trying this suit on. And I think films are a little bit of the same way. It's a way of understanding the world. And that's what we're striving to do with animation, is to take all the messiness of life and make it more pure and easy to understand.
I want to tell you a secret now. I see dead people.
I was 10 when we shot it and 11 when it came out. For this scene, I was just sitting in a bed doing the scene with Bruce, and we were in an actual decommissioned hospital, but it was a very realistic and creepy place. There's an even more morbid element that ended up getting cut out. But when I tell Bruce my secret, the last shot of the scene, they pull back from my bed and you look out the window where you can see an entire another wing of the hospital. And in every window, there is a person with some horrible injury or someone who's gaunt and pale. So you pull back and you see all these people sort of lined up on the other side of it. And that was cut out of the movie. But everybody was on set that day with all this intense prosthetic makeup and horrible car accident victims and everything. The atmosphere was amazing. We had all those people walking around with these injuries. When he tells them these people are around all the time, walking around like normal people, and he's looking at dozens of them right past Bruce while he's telling him this. You don't see that in the movie, but for me, that was like an added element. It's one of the weird paradoxical things about acting where something that emotionally heavy can actually be really enjoyable to do. You go to the depths of darkness and emotional pain, like there's this weird sort of snapback where you wrap the scene and go like, yes, we did it. It was a great crew, and the tone was really set by night because he would dribble a basketball sitting in his director's chair when they were setting up the lights for each scene because he was so relaxed and on such an even keel. He was the most calming, fun presence on set. And I don't think it would have succeeded without that. I also had a lot of fun working with Bruce. I remember he set up this netted driving range downstairs in the convention center when he would go down there and fire off some shots in between scenes. If I remember correctly, they had a cast and crew tournament during the shoot, too. I was on the team with my dad and my studio teacher, Carolyn, and we ended up winning, and the prize was a dinner certificate to the Striped Bass, which was the Philadelphia restaurant where Bruce and Olivia had that first scene for their quote-unquote anniversary dinner.
I want to tell you my secret now. I see dead people.
Throughout the entire process of making the film, we had not highlighted or circled that as something that was going to come to sort of symbolize the film or to become kind of a catchphrase. I think it took us all by surprise when it sort of had a life of its own after the movie came out. I guess you would call it a meme now. I was lucky that there was no Twitter at the time. Yeah, I think everybody had this feeling on the set that we were working on something special. We didn't know that it was going to be the success that it was, but we knew that we had a really fabulous script and a great story, and we wanted to deliver the movie that the script deserved.
You should have gone for the head.
For our entire experience at Marvel, we always try to make very disruptive choices with each film. At the end of Winter Soldier, good guys are the bad guys, we flip everything on its head. Civil War, we divorce the Avengers. When we were working on the script for Infinity War, we knew we wanted to make a strong narrative choice. There's an adage where you write yourself into a corner and you try to figure out how to get out, and that usually creates really dramatic moments for the audience. There's no bigger way to write ourselves into a corner than killing half the characters.
This is no place to die.
Visualization was purely just, we thought about the elemental aspect of your body and what happens to it, and that's accelerating the decomposing process. As far as who went to dust, everything's always built upon story, and we'll just say that there's a reason that the original 6 Avengers are left. It was all story-driven. It was who was where and which character dynamics we wanted to exploit. We knew that we wanted Strange and Tony together because we wanted to see the two egotistical characters going at each other. We knew we wanted Peter with Tony.
You know what you're gonna say? You should not be here. I was gonna go home. I don't want to hear it.
Tony Stark and Peter Parker developed a father-son relationship over the course of 2 films. So we felt like that would be hard to watch. And it was hard to watch on set, and it was hard to watch for the audience, I think. Part of telling stories is learning empathy. I don't know if people can empathize with Thanos, but they can't empathize with Star-Lord. The love of his life was murdered, and he made a very emotional choice.
No, you did not!
That's the human choice that you would make in those circumstances.
All of these characters make flawed choices. Thor is on a journey of revenge after suffering this horrible opening scene defeat where Thanos kills his brother and Heimdall and wipes out many of his people. How does he stop Thanos? If Thor had not been so angry and so revenge-driven, he may have killed Thanos faster than he did.
Gone for the head.
You know, he would have gone for the head, exactly. But he wanted revenge. He wanted to see in Thanos' eyes as he was killing him. That gave Thanos a window to reverse things on him. All these characters have emotional vulnerabilities that complicate their ability to do what needs to be done.
It makes them interesting to watch if all they did was make the right choice every time. It's a fairly predictable and boring story after a while.
We anticipated the ending being complicated for people because it was complicated for ourselves, but we didn't anticipate the depth of emotion that people would experience from that ending.
Ruffalo was in a theater in New York, and he was in a cap and glasses. He was there with his son and his son's friends. And he said when it got to the end of it, people just sat in the audience for 10 minutes, and a guy ripped his shirt off and started screaming "Why" at the screen and marching around the theater. And he thought, all right, I got to get out of here before somebody hurts me. And he snuck out the side door.
We actually never thought of it as a cliffhanger in our own brains. We were telling a complete story. This was Thanos' movie. He was the lead of the film, and we gave him a complete arc and a proper ending.
Me watching, he takes the knife to her, laughing while he does it. He turns to me and he says, "Why so serious?"
42 Entertainment is a company out of Pasadena, and we were brought in to create an experimental marketing campaign and alternate reality experience around The Dark Knight. The community was very split about how Heath Ledger was going to play one of the most iconic villains of all time. Jack Nicholson had put an amazing stamp on the character in the first film, and Heath hadn't really done anything similar to this. There was a lot of question about whether or not he could play this villain. How do you close that gap of that uncertainty in the public vein? So we put a spotlight on that character. The filmmakers wanted to get that very specific first image of Heath in Joker makeup out to the community.
Chris wanted to create a very real universe. It had to be a very organic looking makeup. This guy is sleeping in his clothes for a week. His hair is oily and greasy, and he doesn't take off his makeup for 3 to 5 days. I'm a trained makeup artist, and at first the lines were very clown-like, and it looked like a makeup artist did it, and it just wasn't right. And then Chris Nolan brought in these Francis Bacon paintings, these very blurry images. That really set the tone. That was our Bible, and set us in a direction of muting down and degrading the makeup. I was a little nervous a few times trying to keep the continuity going. We would scrunch Heath's face and I would paint colors over it, and we'd get all these crow's feet in the corners of his eyes, his forehead expression. Those were strategic marks that we always hit.
You want to know how I got these scars?
I couldn't even tell it was Heath. One of the first images that we ever saw of the Joker was the picture that was released when we started the alternate reality experience. We had put a little teaser on the Warner Brothers site where you could find the I Believe in Harvey Dent campaign poster in comic book stores, or Joker cards that said I Believe in Harvey Dent too. And so they followed the cards to a URL where they put in their email, and that allowed them to take a pixel away from the campaign poster, revealing the first image of the Joker. It caught on fire. It was a very effective and dramatic way to change the conversation. The fans really felt like they were a part of it because it was something that they had discovered.
I think we all knew we were on something pretty special.
Heath as the Joker. It was revelatory. It was transformational. I have never felt such an emotional draw to a character that did not have good intentions.
He made it look effortless, just knew exactly what was going to happen, what was going on. It was amazing to watch.
You could not take your eyes off of him. His relationship with Batman in that film, the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object, is one of the greatest relationships between superheroes.
It's become iconic, this whole image. It was an amazing situation to be involved in, and we're still talking about it so many years later.
His performance was just amazing. He will always be the Joker.